Looks like I'm all by myself today, so maybe I'll just ramble for a few minutes till some people start showing up. I got a little tombstone session in this morning. It's been kind of small over the last week, and my back's been a little sore from moving all the boxes of material that came in. So it's like we got a person here. That's cool. I'm not talking to myself anymore. Hello. Yeah, I got a little tombstone session in this morning. I was just talking about that, and hurt my back moving all the boxes around over the last week. So anyway, feeling a little better today. Was good enough to go. Feeling good enough to go out in the water. So I'm back 90% on my back. Anyhow, it's like I'm a minute in talking to myself. So hopefully some people show up. Otherwise, I will just ramble on about the topics I have to talk about, and we'll go from there. Pretty stoked on all the new colors. I got all of those boards over the last couple of weeks. Those are all done, and I've started on the next batch, which is like about a 9 board batch or something crazy, which is kind of cool to have a bunch of boards in a batch like this. I don't like doing much more than what I got right there, just because all the details for every board gets a little overwhelming. Hello, whoever's out there. Thanks for showing up. At least I'm not talking to myself now. So, I got a few things I want to talk about tonight, but also said I was going to wear the long sleeve Ronin shirt this week. So yeah, these are the long sleeve shirts I got in about 2 weeks ago. They're up on the website. It has the triangle logo on the back like this. I'll model it out for you guys. So yeah, it's got Ronin bodyboards down on one arm and the little circle logo here. They're up on the website, so you can check that out if you want to. I know I got a few things I want to get into this week. Am I looking at my notes over here? So I get some people, that hit me up, message me all the time, how can I order a board, and not really knowing what they want, and they're, sometimes they'll ask me like, I'm give me like real simple information like, hey, I'm 6 foot tall and I'm 200 pounds. What would you recommend? And as a shaper, I'm supposed to be able to answer those questions, but boy, I need a heck of a lot more to even begin to try to recommend something to somebody. And to be honest, I try to stay away from recommendations, just because if I recommend something to somebody and then I build it and they don't like it, then that liability's on me. So I really do like for my customers to do a little bit of research, and I don't mind answering questions about different features of stuff. And that's kind of what some of the reasons why I'm doing these live chats, is to kind of answer a lot of questions answer questions in one place that go out to a lot of people, and hopefully that will cut down a little bit of the questions I have to do for every single order that I get. For me, it's hard because if you just tell me you're 200 pounds and I'm 6 foot tall, well, geez, man, I need what type of water do you ride? Do you DK or prone? Do you combo ride? I got so many other things that I would need to know before I could even begin to recommend something to somebody. How do you like your board to flex? How warm is the water? There's a lot of things that I need from a person to really, really kind of dial in any kind of suggestions that I could give. And then, as far as suggestions or recommendations go, I can only recommend things stuff that I have knowledge about. And that's my own personal writing. I know how my boards ride and react, and I can pull from that knowledge and experience of me being out there on quite a few different shapes. At least prone riding, because I'm mostly a prone rider when I'm in the water. So people ask me a lot about DK questions and stuff, and I do my best to try to answer those things. But I don't have a lot of firsthand practical knowledge of DKing, just because I'm not a big DKer. Gosh, I sure respect the riding style though, and I build a lot of DK boards, special boards for people out there, and hey, it looks like we got 3 people here now. So hello everyone. So I have to try to go off of some feedback I get from the guys that I've made DK boards for, as far as when people ask me about, sometimes it's about the vector placement or how wide of a nose should be on a DK board, or, but when somebody just says, hey, I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds, it just really isn't enough for me to even begin to try to go, hey, yeah, you want this board, or you want this thing. Because there's so so many options in the boards that I build that, you know, I need a lot more. And it's good if a customer can go out and educate themselves a little bit, you know. That's also why I'm doing all these live chats, so people go back and watch some of the previous ones I've done and kind of educate themselves before they come to me and go, hey, you know, I saw this thing, you know, what you're talking about, you know, these channels versus these channels, or this tail versus that tail, you know, and how it performs versus this or that. And then that gives them the knowledge when they come to me, go, oh, dude, I really want to try one of those scallop tails. You know, I've been riding a clip crescent forever, and you know, those scallop tails kind of really interest me, and you know. But you know, if they go back and watch some of the previous ones, and I describe about, you know, how it affects the board and how it affects the performance of a board, you know, it's cool to go back and watch that stuff to kind of educate yourself, and I highly recommend people to do that. So, you know, and sometimes I'll get hit up with questions of stuff that I've covered previously. So sometimes I'll answer those questions briefly where I've kind of explained them longer in some of the previous chats. So, you know, go back and watch those things at your leisure. That's kind of why they're all up there. So, like I said, hey, if anybody's got any questions, just throw it in the live feed chat window, or wherever you can type stuff in, whether you're on a phone or computer, or whatever. I'm sure there's a button there where you can find where to type a question in. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to answer questions. I have a few topics, but I want to answer questions. That's why I'm here. So, so yeah, recommendations. It's, you know, I like, you know, I really recommend that people go out there and try, ride different things, and, you know, ride your friend's board, something maybe you wouldn't order or wasn't right for you, but just ride it, even if it's, you know, 2 inches longer than what you normally ride, or 2 inches shorter than what you normally ride. Just go out and ride it and see how it feels different. That alone is knowledge for you to pull from later on when you go, oh, well, I liked it. You know, I like the longer rail on this. It really went faster, but it's just too long and it felt too, you know, on my body. So it's really good to go out there and put your hands on different boards and ride different boards in the water, even at your friends' boards. That's what I would recommend doing first, is try to educate yourself as much as you can about all the different board features. And then when you have questions, come to me and ask me. That's really why I'm here. But for me, just to give you a recommendation, I know there's people out there and other business models, boogie board people out there that are bodyboard manufacturers that'll give recommendations. Oh yeah, you're 2 foot this, you know, just ride this model. This model, you know, the XYZ model is going to be the one for you, you know. But that's just a blanket answer for a cookie cutter kind of model board. So, you know, it's the simple answer instead of really diving in deep with your customer and trying to figure out what will work for them best. And that's ultimately kind of what I'm about. And you know, that's another topic I kind of wanted to get into tonight. Like I said, if anybody want to interrupt me and ask questions, feel free. I'm just kind of rambling until I get some chat comments or questions. So anyway, another thing I wanted to get into, kind of leading into from the last thing into my business model versus some of the other business models out there. And, you know, when I started Ronin, and even kind of before that, I always had this phrase in my head when it came to my business model, I wanted to build hot rods, not Hondas. And, you know, I know that, you know, people, you know, before people get too defensive out there, is that, you know, Hondas are great cars, man. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of great Hondas on the road, and then there's reasons why people buy those cars, you know, because they're readily available. You can walk onto any kind of car dealership lot, and there's a white one, there's a gray one, there's a black one, and then, you know, there's all these modeled type of cars where you can just go and buy a car right off the lot, and it's like what your neighbor has, and you know your neighbor loves it, and then, you know, oh, it works for them, I like how it looks, I'll just go buy that car, you know, which is cool. I mean, you know, there needs to be something like that out there. But say on the flip side of that, you know, you have you got like custom hot rod shops out there that, you know, for a smaller portion of the market, or, you know, most of the pie of the car market is all dealerships and this brand and this brand. But then the very small little niche market is like the hot rod industry, and you know, there's these little shops that are just ran by absolute, you know, wizards when it comes to building cars, and they're complete craftsmen that just know their trade so unbelievable well, from the wheels all the way up to the paint. You know, they'll build you that car however you want. When you walk into one of those kind of shops, that person will work with you to build you your dream car, you know, or your dream hot rod, right? And that car is going to drive and perform and do things that the car off the lot just won't. It'll never touch that with. And when you see you driving down the road, you know, people, it's a head turner because it's like, man, I've never seen something quite like that. Where a Honda Accord or a Civic drives by, they're just like invisible. It's just another car driving down the road. It doesn't catch your eye really, unless you're into them. I mean, some people are into it. Then, like I said, I drive a Toyota Tacoma, so I'm not trying to knock Hondas whatsoever. I think they're great cars. They're super dependable. They're reliable. There's a lot of really good reasons why there's so many of those cars on the road. But on the flip side of that, I live right next to Highway 1, and I see all kinds of cool cars driving down Highway 1 all the time. A lot of them are those hot rod clubs that you see, and you'll see these pack of hot rod cars roll through that are it just turns your head when they drive by. You're like, whoa, look at that one, look at that one, look at that, and they're all very unique and custom for that person. So when I started Ronin, I was like, I want to build hot rods. I want to have that hot rod shop kind of feel where I work with my customer to figure out the best board or their dream board. And I do my best to make that happen on every single board. Now sometimes I fall a little short because it is what it is, man, but I just do my best to make that person's dream board come true. So that's kind of my philosophy behind hot rods versus Hondas. It's just, when I started my business, I wanted to provide a hot rod type of shop service versus a dealership kind of stuff for the masses. So Ronin boards are built for the individual, not the masses. That's kind of one of my things, is that I want to build boards for the individual, not pump out a bunch of model boards and then whoever's going to come buy it, and you get a red one or a black one or a yellow, blue one, but you get no options. It is what it is. You buy what's there. So I want to provide, and it's ultimately a service that I think that I would want personally, because I'm a pretty discriminate rider. Like when it comes to boards, because I've really only ever ridden custom boards. I've been very lucky that I stumbled into the tube shop and just started getting custom boards right from the beginning of my riding. So I've never really ridden stock boards, and I've always tweaked my boards from board to board. I'm always kind of looking for the next little thing or how I can tweak it to make it a little bit better. Now I've built some that are very similar to the previous ones because I over the years I know what I like and I know what I want on the board. But what's really cool is that my customers always are coming up with these crazy cool ideas, and then it gets me curious about like, well, how does that go? I want to give that a try. So my mind's always thinking like, geez, boy, it might be something that I would want on the board, but I'm sure curious on like how the stepped rail board for Searle I built, or it's just some of the other, like I still haven't ridden a wide nose tombstone, and I know some guys out there really love the shape. My personal tombstone is the pulled in nose one, and I just ride it on small days. I rode it this morning, and it's a great small weight board. It's really my go-to when it's under 3 foot. 3 foot and under, I just ride my tombstone. If it's over 3 foot, I usually ride my regular boards. Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of my theory behind the whole hot rod versus Honda thing. And I just want to build cool, unique boards for the individual, individual customer, and work with them to make their dream boards come true. So that's kind of that whole thing. Gosh, looks like we got 4 people here. If there's any questions, you guys hit me in the live chat, and I'll do my best to answer whatever kind of questions anybody has. So feel free to ask away. Yeah, it's pretty slow feed tonight. I usually get somebody saying hi or something. Hey, Nick, good to see you. Yeah, Nick's asking about if there's been a kind of a shift in like board template, prone board template. So over the years, and I think as things have gotten modernized, everybody you think about the old classic prone shapes, and everybody's going to pull back to like a Mach 7.7. That really is the go-to classic shape. That's just 42 inch, 11 and a half, 12 inch nose, 18 inch tail, it's 22 wide, but that nose to wide point thing is something I think that's changed a little bit over the years. Those older prone boards tend to have a nose to wide point number. That's one of the things. You got some basic numbers when it comes to a boogie board. You got the nose dimension, you got the wide point dimension, and you got the tail dimension. Okay. And then you also have what they call the nose to wide point. So there's also a measurement that's from the nose down to where the widest point in the board is. That's the nose to wide point number, and that kind of can shift where that wide point's out of your board, and that really affects the rail lines of a board. And like I said, over time, the old Mach 7.7s had a wide point that was a little further back than kind of what the more modern prone boards are. I think over time, and Ben Severson was really big about this too, over with his personal boards, is all of his boards really push the wide point forward on them. on the boards. And if you hold the same width numbers on the wide point and the tail, but you just take the wide point and you shift it closer to the nose, what happens is you get less curve in the back half of the rail. So what that does is it really kind of straightens out the rail line on the back half of the board, because you really can't go out once that comes off the nose and hits the wide point. You can't go any wider than that back. So once you hit that, it's got to resolve at that wide point and it's got to go back to the tail. So the older boards had, a little bit wider tails, maybe, I think, and a little bit wider point further back. So, and how it's changed, at least that I've seen over the years, is the wide point's got a little bit further closer to the nose instead of a little bit further back towards the mid part of the board. And what that does is, like I said, it straightens out the back half of the rail. If you take that and you pull it back here, now you got more room more curve in the board when the wide point's a little further back. So, and how's that affect how the board rides is probably the next question after that, I'd imagine, is that the further you push it forward and the straighter the rail line is, when you get the board over on rail and you're on rail and you're going down the line, that rail is there's going to be more rail in the water and it's going to go faster because you have more rail in the water versus the curve that's happening. It's just going to be faster because it's a straighter rail line and it's going to plane better and faster. Versus the one that's further back, it's going to be way more turny. You're going to be able to maneuver way better with a wide point that's pulled back a little bit on a prone board. So I think that's kind of what has changed over the years, that the wide point's gone forward, it's straightened out the rail lines. Now, as far as noses go, I think noses come down ultimately what feels right to you. There's kind of a scale that happens with the nose number versus how long the board is. I mean, there's some pretty traditional shapes that, nose dimensions that happen off of how long the board is, if it's a prone or a DK. But what's cool about custom is you can make it however you want. So, if you want a DK board that has a little bit wider nose because you don't like the really pulled in nose, then that's fine. We can do that. That's what custom boards are all about, really. So yeah, hopefully that answers kind of, let's see here. Yeah, your question there, Nick. I think it kind of does. Hey everybody, if you guys got any questions, hit them up in the chat. Well, I'm more than happy to answer kind of anything, anything that people can kind of fire away at me. So yeah, hit me up. Got some time to go here, and hopefully we get some questions in the chat. I mean, I can ramble on about my topics, but like I said, I really like trying to answer people's questions. And if you got questions off my answers of questions, feel free to keep firing back. It kind of keeps the chat moving a little bit smoother instead of me just rambling on about my topics. But yeah, so geez, hey Nick. Okay, so he's asking about maybe the sharpness of my rails. Is there anything? He said that he noticed that my rails on my boards are maybe a little bit sharper than what some other boards out there are. And geez, really there's kind of 3 points to the rail. You got the point on the very top part of the deck, and then you got the very outside of the rail, which is the very tip of the rail, and then you have the edge on the bottom side of the slick. So I have some theories about all that stuff. I'm not sure exactly what point or what edge of the board you're kind of talking about. Is it kind of like, the top edge is, always fairly rounded unless you have a cut top rail. Then this line right up here gets a little bit sharper if you have a cut top rail on a board. Now, as far as the rail point down the edge of the board goes, that's another thing. And then you have, like I said, the bottom edge that runs along the bottom slick here. So I'm not sure exactly what point you're talking about, Nick, but I can kind of, like I said, the top edge is usually almost always nice and soft and rounded. Now, as far as the line that runs down, the rail point here that runs through the board, they're usually it's just kind of soft and rounded off all the way through traditionally. That's all hand sanded. Like after you put the rail pieces on, you go back and you sand this rail edge off to make it nice and round, so it's not sharp. Now, I have some theories about that. Is that you hear me talk about sometimes the rail point here, yeah. So how I do mine, and like if you heard me talk about rounded to sharp rails, I think in one of the previous chats I kind of showed that where I ran down the rail. But what happens when you go around to sharp is that through the front part of the rail till about where your elbows are at, I like this part of the rail to be nice and rounded, and I'll definitely sand some off to make this rounded on most boards. But as it gets past your elbows and starts to work towards the tail of the board, I like to try to leave the rounded to sharp thing is I keep this rounded, and then from about your elbows back, it starts getting really sharp through here. I hardly sand anything off at the back part of the tail. I try to keep almost as sharp as I can. And then that just, like I said, it gradually goes from sharp to round through here. And the thinking with that is that anytime when you're up, anywhere where your hand, number one, anywhere where your hand touches needs to be soft. No sharp edges where your hands are. There's something about that to me is that I don't want to feel a really sharp edge with my hand anywhere where I put my hands. So all of that needs to be just from the rider's perspective and the feel for your hands is that needs to be nice and rounded. It just feels better in your hand if there's not something super sharp here. And now this part of the rail usually doesn't hit the water too much either, unless you're really pushing forward or leaning forward or you're spinning or something like that. And when you're doing those types of things, you're usually driving for speed or you're spinning when you're up toward the front part of the nose spinning. So in my mind, I don't want anything sharp up in the upper part of the board up here because that when you're leaning forward speed, you need speed. You don't want anything to catch or be catchy in the front part of the board when you're leaning forward trying to drive, or when you're spinning. When you're up there, you want everything to kind of be loose and so you can make the spin and nothing's going to catch or slow you down through your spin. Now, the back half of the rail is a different deal. So like that's the part of the board that's cutting into the wave face. Now, for me, I've always thought that something rounded through here, and I know I've heard some other theories about rounded holds better than pointed, but I don't know, man. If you have a channeled rail through here and you have a sharp rail point, to me, when I set that edge into the water, it just knifes into the wave face and it holds, and it'll hold its line better, and it won't be as side slippy because it's knifing into the water. So that's kind of the theory of how it starts off rounded here and gets sharper, like from the midpoint back, is rounded soft up here for your hands and no catchy, but you want it to be kind of almost bitey and catchy through the back half of the rail. Now, the other part of the rail we didn't really talk about is the bottom edge down here. Now, usually for the first part of the nose cut right through here, I'll even take and round and sand this part of the rail off just a little bit. And then as it gets about where your elbow's at through here, I start keeping this edge through the back half of the board, through the tail. It's kind of almost as sharp as I can keep it. And I just think that once again, that's just going to bite and hold into the wave face than something that's kind of rounded off a little bit. And that's kind of my thinking of with like rail points and rail profiles. Now this is obviously more like a 60-40 rail. You get 50-50 rails and 55-45 and all that madness, but that doesn't really affect how the rail points go usually. So that's kind of a brief rundown of rails. Hey, this is a board maybe not too many people have seen. This is my personal prone vector board. It's just kind of my typical shape that I usually ride, 3 to 6 scallop tail, but it has it's completely flat bottom. There's no channels at all on this board because it was in a real early board, and I wanted to experiment with some vector setups on a prone setup just for my own personal reference of riding. So I actually used some of the different types of FCS inserts on this one. It's the only board I've really used these on because I really think these type of plugs are a little bit better for a boogie board than these. These are made more for when you're putting them in a surfboard and then you're going to glass over everything. You don't really get the opportunity to glass over these things like you do on a surfboard. So I don't know. It's just an experiment. It's my personal board. I wanted to see if I can kind of get these types of FCS to go in a board. It's the only one I've ever done like that. But yeah, I've ridden this thing with every vector fin in every position and just about every combination you could possibly do. Prone riding, but like I said, I personally just like the VS fin right here in the back, right here in this, just one single one right in the back. That's for me. These bite too crazy hard for me at least when I'm prone riding. It's too much bite and hold for me. I like my board. Believe it or not, I want my board a little bit looser. I usually don't want. That's the thing about it. But you take all this off the flat bottom board, it's a side slipping monster. But all it takes is that one little fin right here, and man, you sit back on this tail with just the VS, and it'll drive and hold through a bottom turn so nice. It really is a fun feel. It is a little bit tougher to spin because you got to really get that fin out of the water to get a spin around, but it's possible. Nathaniel, yeah, he's talking. What do you do when to the nose when you do a diamond nose? Yeah. People get asked me that a lot. It's like, what's a diamond nose? To me, what it is you can see this board actually has just a little bit of a diamond nose. Instead of this nose being like straight across point to point, it actually the nose profile has a little point, goes to a little bit of a point right here in the center part of the board. And what the thinking is behind that is that when your hand's up here and if you're you have your regular hand position right here on the board, is that if you look at your angles of your knuckles, they're not straight across. They're actually sitting at a little bit of an angle. So Buzz and I at Tubes had to talk about this type of nose profile years ago, and I've really just started incorporating it a lot into my personal boards, and now it goes into a lot of the other boards I build for customers and stuff. I know some of like the Vector guys, or Triad guys, they got really gnarly diamond pointed nose that on some of their DK boards it gets more extreme than mine. Same thing with, I think Gato has done a couple that are really pointed out too. I don't know. I keep mine a little bit more subtle than those guys just because I think it's just enough, at least for prone riding. You don't need something crazy pointed. You know what it also does too is that you can see it in here, but because you want the normal feel out here on the corner of a normal nose, but because it gets almost a little bit thinner right towards the point, so it really does it'll even thin out the nose a little bit more right here at the point. So that's kind of the rundown on the diamond nose. Is that it's just it matches the angle of your fingers and holds a little bit better. Also, I feel like when you're leaning forward and driving, it's not going to. It's because it's pulled back just a little bit that when your nose will be the corner will be a little less catchy if it does. The nose corner catches when you're trying to lean forward and drive for speed. So it might save you a little bit of the time just because it's pulled, that nose corner's pulled back just a little bit. I do mine about 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, kind of depending on the nose width and what people want for the diamond nose. Some of the DK boards I've done with where you got a smaller nose, I've actually pointed it out a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown on the diamond nose. I like it. I put it almost on all my personal boards. I really think it's a cool feel to the nose. Like I said, I just use it on my prone boards, but because I don't really DK much. So, but a lot of DK guys love it just because, like, for that same thing is that when they're driving forward and leaning for speed, the nose corner is a little more forgiving if it does catch. Especially if your board's flat and it doesn't have any type of nose rocker in it. If you have a nose rocker, it's a little more forgiving if you're leaning forward on DKing and your nose corner catches. That's just even less likely to catch. But if you got a full flat deck board on a DK board and you're leaning forward and you have a square nose, the nose corners can catch a little bit more. So it's kind of on those, it might be better just to kind of pull back the nose corners just a little bit so the nose corner doesn't catch on a flat deck board. I mean, you can do it on a nose rocker board too. So just whatever you want. That's the cool thing about custom. It's like we're up to 6 people now, which is kind of cool. So if anybody has any questions, fire them away in the chat window, and I'll get at answering and stuff. So it's cool to see we got some bodies in here now. Yep. So yeah, and that getting back to the sharp rail thing, Nick, is that when you channel out the rail, it even gives you a chance to even make it even more sharper. You've probably noticed that on Sterling's board that you probably got to put your hands on, is that as it channels out, it almost makes that back even more sharper at the back half of the rail. That's the rail profile I've been putting on all my personal boards for since I started doing Ronin pretty much. I didn't really do channel rails back in the day. But I was going rounded to sharper back in the Tubes days on some of my last Tubes boards. But I wasn't really doing the channel rail thing until I got into making my own boards with Ronin. But like I said, that channeling it out makes it even sharper on that point. Well, Nick, the next DK board you get, we'll trick it out. I know that you got the prone one I just started on, but you're probably going to need a year or two on the one I just built, the DK I just built you, before you're going to maybe want another DK board. But hey, if you want one in the meantime, we'll make you something a little bit outside the box. You got one that's inside the box. We can build you one that's outside the box now. I'd be down for that for sure. I got some. Maybe we'll even try give you just a slight asymmetrical DK too. Maybe, Nick. Maybe something to play around with if you're gonna get outside the box. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even if it's just like a 1 inch offset, I know I've done like two and about 2.5 inches is about as much as I've done on the offset of a asymmetrical DK board. I think it's usually enough, but um, I've done a lot of quite a few of them that are just 1 inch offset, so you get like a 43 on one side. The longer side's usually your knee side, and the shorter side's usually your foot side. So I've done them where it's 43, 42, or 40, 44, 42, and then it's a 2 inch offset. So yeah, anything's kind of possible. Within reason, and now that I do have some longer bottom slick now. I know that some people have been asking for some longer boards, and now I can do boards up to probably about 47 inches is about as long as I can go right now, which is pretty good. I don't think there's too many 47-inch body boards out there. So I know I just did a 46, and I got another 46 in the batch that I'm working on now. So yeah, it's pretty fun to get back into making some longer boards. I only have white slick, but it is Surlyn. That's the thing about when you get into the bottom slicks. They get into bottom slicks. Most of the longer, if you find a board that's like a 46, a lot of the time it only has HDPE bottom slick, and it doesn't really have Surlyn. Surlyn's really hard to find in longer pieces, and I was lucky enough to be able to get a roll of it this time. So I have a pretty long roll of Surlyn that I can basically cut to any length I can want. But my laminator only does so long of boards, and my core pieces, I usually get them only 48 inches long. You need to cut a little bit off the front and the back. That's why I said 47 inches long versus 48. So that's kind of where I'm at now with about how long of boards I can make. But just know that, if I got to ship these boards, especially to Hawaii, they're expensive to ship to Hawaii. So a box over 46 inches, the price just starts going. Now that's the box, because if you got I usually need about an inch to almost inch and a half to 2 inches inside the box. So if you got a 42-inch board, it's usually a 44-inch box. So if you're getting a 46-inch board, you usually got to have a 48-inch box. Now that's just going to be really expensive to get to Hawaii or some of the other places. So just be ready. If you want a longer board, you're going to have to pay a little bit more in shipping. It's just the reality of it. Okay, well now, Nick, you're asking about the benefits of and differences of asymmetrical boards, and I've talked a little bit about that in some of the other ones that I've done. But I think that it's all about when it comes to the fundamentals of asymmetrical design and DK. It's all about your stance. Number one, your goofy foot or your regular, and then that kind of that's the shorter side. Like I said, goes on your whatever your front foot is. That's the shorter side, and then the longer side's usually where your knee rides, whatever rail your knee rides on. So, what I would do is, just as a base, if you've never ridden one that's asymmetrical, I would say, split the difference. And, like if you normally ride a 42-inch board, maybe try going 43 on one side and 41 on the other. So your knee side's going to be the 43, your foot side's going to be a 41, and you usually ride a 42-inch board, and that's what the board will be pretty much in the center part of the board, down the center line of the board. And then, like I said, the one rail will get longer and the other rail gets shorter, but you're trying to split the difference of it and figure how long of a board should I get? I usually ride a 43, then you might want to go 44, 42, or you just go a half inch on, so you're going, go 44 to, 40, oh geez, what am I doing? Only 1 inch offset. So you just, you only put 1 inch offset in it versus 2 inches. So, now what are the benefits of it? It's all, like I said, it's all about pivot points. So you can't ride both. Number one, you can't ride both rails at the same time. It's impossible. I mean, I guess if you're going flat, but then you're not riding on the rails, you're just riding. If you're going straight and just riding flat, you're not really riding on one of the rails. You're just going straight and you're riding on the flat part of the board. But as soon as you commit to going one way or the other, then your pivot points or where your pressure points are out on the board are entirely different. It's like where your knee is and your ankle is way towards the back part of the board, where your front foot's way further up on the board. So if you're going front side, say if I'm regular footed, that's why I'm just doing this automatically. So I just want to put my left foot up. So when I do that and I go front side, now I'm riding on my shin and knee, and there's a little weight on my front foot just for control. Most of my weight's over on my right on my knee, and so you're riding further back on the board. That's why you usually want a longer rail, because you're riding usually further back on the tail of the board. Now So that's the thing, thinking with that side of the board. Now, when you go to the other way, say I'm going to go backside to the wave, and and now all of a sudden I'm going to go, and you definitely have some weight out on your outside rail, but a lot of your weight's on your front foot, and it's further forward than what your knee and shin would be for on that side of the board. So obviously, whenever you go to pivot and do things, and the pressure points are all different. So how the rail's designed because of where those pressure points are at, that's the theory kind of behind the asymmetrical designs of DK boards. So I just think that, as far as benefits go, when you're riding on your foot and on your backside, you just don't need as long of a rail. That's why you shorten up the rail. Yeah, it's just kind of, and then when you're going the other way, like I said, you're riding further back on the board. You're not using as much of the front of the rail. I mean, you can lean forward and drive, but you really are still riding on your inside rail, whichever way you're going. And those pressure points are different. That's why the rails are different. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking behind asymmetrical stuff. I hope that kind of clarifies some stuff. And, yeah, so that's, I don't know. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nick. Anybody else got any questions? Hit it up in the chat feed. I'll definitely be down for answering questions. So I have one more little thing I want to talk about, but we're only about halfway through. So, I can save it a little towards the end, or I can get into my last little thing that I wanted to talk about. So I guess I'll just get into it then, since I'm not getting any questions. I get this theory, and a few people have heard me talk about it a little bit, and it's kind of what I call the 33% rule, or equation, or whatever it is. And it also gets back to a conversation I had with Buzz a long time ago, and he kind of turned me on to this whole philosophy about 33%. And when it comes to riding a board, people come to me, ask me for recommendations. I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier on, but they tell me I want a fast board, and I've talked about this in some of the previous chats that I don't think really. I mean, speed. A board can be fast or a dog, no doubt about it, but ultimately the speed comes from the power of the wave, not the board. The board reacts to the power of the wave that's given it to it. Okay, so. And then also the skill of the rider. So basically, that's the 33%. There's 33%. The whole 100% of the thing. 33% of it is the wave. 33% of it is the board, and 33% is the rider. Okay, so you got to have all three of those things, and you don't have to have all three of them. You just have to. My theory is you probably just have to have two of those things to have a positive situation. In most cases, I mean, if you got all three, it's pretty much epic as it can be. If you have the epic waves, and you got the rider that has some skill, and he's on a board that will perform and in those types of conditions that he knows and is used to, that's the 100% that you're looking for. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you'll get a really good rider with a really good board, but then you don't have a very good wave. But that good rider is still going to be able to go out there with the board he's familiar with, even on a small, mushy, nothing wave, and he's going to be able to go out and perform. So, I really think that yeah. Hey, Fatima, thanks for. I'll get into that in just a second. So there's you need two of those things. Now the one time when I think it might not work is if you have a really good wave and you got a really good board, but you got a rider who's just inexperienced. That's the only one time I think that the one real flaw in that whole theory about you only need two is that if you have a rider who just doesn't know what the hell they're doing, it doesn't matter how good the wave is or how good the board is, they need some experience in order to have it be a positive situation. So, and then people out there that are like, okay, well, 33 and 33 is only 99%. So what? Then you have what but this came from a conversation from Buzz, and he passed all this on to me, is that then you have the mystery 1%. So you got the board, the rider, and the wave, and then you have the mystery 1%. So you got 33%, 33%, 33%, and the mystery 1%. So I really kind of believe in that a lot, is that you need at least two of those things to have a positive situation in the water. You know, you could have the best rider in the world at riding a really good wave, but he's got a piece of shit board. He's still going to go out there and perform, and it's still going to be a positive situation. So, you know, a good rider can ride just about any kind of board. Yeah, I kind of somewhat agree with you there. It doesn't hurt. Let's see, Fatima. Let's see. Yeah, I'm glad you made it in this time, Fatima. It's good to see you. He's asking me about various types of bottoms and how they compared to standard channels. So he's talking like maybe a quad versus an Apollo versus big channels and the ion channel system. And boy, they're just all different, Fatima. You know, I think the more time you and more chances you get to ride with different channeled out boards, it really comes down to just riding some things and checking stuff out. But you know, I guess a simple answer to that is that you guys have heard me talk about standard channels. I'm not a super huge fan of them just because I don't think they do a whole lot to add performance. They add a little bit of hold when you're sitting back on the tail, a little bit of bite. And the theory is that, you know, you're adding surface area. So there's that surface area and that little hollow spot when you sit back on the tail is going to help and stop the board from side slipping out. But that doesn't help you at all when you're leaning forward or you're in a heavy type of situation and you really need your board to track its direction. So as far as that goes, is anytime you get into a longer channel system or a multi-channeled system on the bottom of a board, it's just going to hold its direction and track its direction much better, especially the faster you're going. And that's the thing about once you're going fast on a board, the last thing you want to do is lose control, because it's just disaster waiting to happen. So the better, you know, like in the first, like I said, the first thing is the speed comes from the wave. When you take off and the wave's steep, and that's where the speed comes from. Now you can generate speed in other ways. You know, you can really lean into a bottom turn with a proper board as long as it doesn't side slip out, and you can drive through that turn and create speed. You know, and then there's ways to lean forward, and there's actually little ways to pump through a wave with the board if you know what you're doing and how you can work the wave face and actually pump, kind of like the skateboard or a snowboard, kind of a pump and a half pipe. It works really similar to that because, I mean, I grew up skateboarding and snowboarding, so I understand that whole pump thing that happens on a ramp or a transition. That same kind of effect happens on a wave. And like the slower the wave face is like this, you're just not going to be going as fast. It's just the nature of gravity. You know, it's like when you're skiing, you know, you're on the bunny hill or you're on the black diamond. Which one do you think you're going to go faster on? So the steeper the wave gets, and the more it means the faster you get to go. And obviously the more long and drawn out it is, if it's steep but it's only 2 feet tall, you can only go so fast on that. But if it's 6 to 8 to 10 foot and it's real steep, just you get going that much faster because there's even more room for you to generate speed through the drop or whatever else. So, you know, once you get going at that speed, how does your board react to it? You know, is it when you get in lean into that bottom turn, and if you say you had a clip crescent tail with standard channels, it's just not going to hold like what a scallop tail and a multi-channel board would do. When you sit back on that tail and you try to drive through your bottom turn, it's just not going to hold like a clip crescent standard channel. It's not going to hold. It's going to want to side slip out a little bit more. It's going to hold, I mean, if you know what you're doing, but like I said, how does the board react to the speed that's provided by the wave? And the last thing I want to do is lose speed because I got to compensate for lack of control. That's one of the biggest things is it's speed versus control. You don't want to have to sacrifice speed for control. And as soon as you start to lose control, in order to regain control, you got to sacrifice speed. Because you got to re-engage your rail. Like say, like I'm on a really steep wave face and I start side slipping out or something, you know, and I really need to drive and go forward. Well, as soon as you start side slipping out, you got to like sit back more on your tail or lean into the rail a little bit harder. And then that's a speed killer. You want to be uprighting on the top of your board so you can lean forward and drive for speed without side slipping. Now, eventually it's going to happen. No matter the nature of the beast it's going to side slip and break loose at some point. But the longer the channels are and the more detailed the channel are, I think, just the better your hold and the better the board's going to track its direction at speed. And it means you're not going to lose control as easily, which means you can go faster. So that's kind of the thinking a little bit behind now Apollo, the Apollos, and I don't know. It just depends on what the ion ones. Ion systems have like a tapered channel versus there's tapered channels that kind of almost look like a V channel, and then there's kind of like the standard concave shapes of channels. Most channels are kind of like just consistently concave, just a straight like curve like through the channel. And if it's a wider channel, it's usually a little bit more subtle, or sometimes it gets tight and then goes flat across. There's a few ways you can do bottoms and stuff, and they all react a little bit differently. Just like I said, it comes down to riding them and getting the feel for what the differences are between the different channel systems. And like I've ridden quite a few of them at this point. I started off riding standard channels. My very first Tubes custom board had standard channels. And right after that, I went into another one that they're kind of what we call reverse channels. I think the Tubes guys called it like an easy flow channel, but it's a wide entry channel into something a little bit narrow. So it starts wide and gets narrow. That was like my second board. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, that one's cool. It held a little bit better. But what happens if we just get rid of that whole center part of the bump and just go to a big single concave? So you really just get a whole concave at bottom. That's the setup that I rode for years, is a single concave bottom on a lot of my older Tube board. Once I got into that, and then what I did is once I got into the Tube shop, and was able to start doing these single concaves myself, I would take them, a standard channel only goes about 12 inches into the board. Well, I would take, these single concaves and take them, almost up to the back of your elbows, at least halfway through the board. Basically, as far as the sanding jig at Tubes would go and allow me to do it. I mean, I do channels at Ronin all by hand. But when I was over there, they had a whole like sanding jig thing for all the different channel shapes and stuff. It was just, it was total BuzzTech madness for high production stuff. I mean, they were cranking out a lot of boards in the day, and they had to be able to do these channels faster. So they Buzz came up with a system to be able to sand those things out faster. And they were kind of more machine shaped a little bit versus something that's true hand shaped, like because I hand shape out, with Sure planes, all my channels at Ronin. So it gives me a lot more freedom to do different type of channel systems, because they're all done by hand versus, if you had to program a CNC machine, it'd be a nightmare for doing what I do, because every board is different. So it means every CNC cut file would have to be different for every channel system, depending on the dimensions of the board. And it'd be a nightmare to CNC program every single, little tweak of a board, of a custom board. So really, like I said, the best way to do it, at least that I found, is just do it by hand. It takes a little bit longer, but it really gives you the freedom to really experiment with all the channels and stuff. So yeah, Opolos, that's a pretty interesting channel system. There's not a lot of people that's really seen a true Opolo board. They've only made a few of those, and I think they're all kind of came out of Australia. Rudder's basic boards had done quite a few. In fact, I have one of his. It's probably my most prized board in all my board collection. Is I have one basic boards. It's an Opolo bottom Rudder's board. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna grab it and show it to you guys. Hold on a second. Just right around the corner here. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a huge fan of what Rudder's was doing. If you watched last week's chat, I went into some of my influences and what, Rudder's Luke Redmond down in Australia. He had his own little board brand for quite a few years, and he still has it. He's just not actively shaping right now. And I know he's ultimately trying to get back in there, from what I've heard. And I'd love to see him shaping boards again. He's serious influence on the direction I went with my business. So, go back and watch last week. I kind of went off on a little bit, but like I said, I had a guy up in Northern Bay Area who wanted me to build him an Opalo bottom board, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'd seen some pictures of it, but I've never really held one. So, I made that board. I made him a board off of kind of the pictures that I'd seen for the Opalo bottom, and I had to do it off of like pictures from the basic boards, Instagram and stuff. I just went there and started looking at pictures of what he was doing and how he's doing those bottoms. But what it is it's a channel system that goes almost nose to tail. So anyway, I made it for the guy in the Bay Area, and I sent it to him. The one that I thought he's like, oh, these channels aren't quite right. They're a little bit different than the true Opalo that he's like, I have one. And he's like, I can send it to you. And I was so happy that he sent me the board. So I got to put my hands on it. It's the first time I ever got to touch a Rudder's board. I was really, really excited to hold it. And so he's like, yeah, man, the first one didn't come out too good, but I'm going to send you this one. And I'm like, dude, if I had it in my hands, I could definitely make it more accurately. So he's like, I'll just send it to you. And so he sent me the board, and I was like, oh, okay, the light bulb went on. I'm like, I see what I did wrong, but so, and then I made him the second board, and I'm like, hey, you want me to send you this board back? He's like, no, you can just keep it. He's like, I'll be, and then I made him the remake of the second time around. I think he's still riding it up in the Ocean Beach area. Super nice guy. He seemed to like it. The second board, he was definitely way more stoked on. But anyway, as far as this is the Rudder's board that I have. It's a bat tail, flat deck. There's nothing really going on the top. It's just a standard bat tail kind of thing. But what's really cool about the Opalo bottoms is that the channel system goes like all the way up through the nose. So it's just crazy that you got this channel that starts out. And what's really cool too is that it has almost a standard channel through this part of the board, but then it goes from there up through here. It's more like a tapered channel where instead of it just being like scooped out like a normal channel would be, what it does is it starts tapering. So it has more of a hard straight angle instead of being a scoop. So then that's what carries all the way up through the nose of the board. It's pretty wild that they took these channels and took them all the way up through here. Now when you think about when you're riding, what part of the board's really riding in the water? I mean, it's usually from your elbows back, unless you're leaning forward and driving for some speed or something. That's the only time anything up in this area even touches the water, unless you're leaning forward and driving for speed. So in my eyes, I'm like, what the heck is a channel all the way up here going to do for you? It really doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, it looks cool for sure, but I mean, like, there's no water usually channeling through right behind the nose bulbs. If you're channeling water through this part, you're probably purling and going face first into the wave. You definitely don't want to do that. But the more I put my hands on this board, all of a sudden it started to make sense. I was like, it's like, well, it feels good, like a nice long rail channel would be up through the side of the board. But what feels really good is like when you put your hands kind of almost on the side of the nose, you get this nice little finger wrap. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a nose bulb, but it kind of is like a bulby kind of feel anywhere where you grab the rail. It does have a good feel, like how your hand wraps over and underneath. I think it might almost be more about grip than it is about hydrodynamics in the front part of the board of the Opalo system. Also with this, you can kind of see it. It only has mesh in the center part of the board. There's no mesh through the outside of the channels. That's another thing of this board and how I think how it was made is just, and it might give you a little bit more flex through the outside of the rails here because the mesh isn't out there. And it makes it a little more easy to laminate the skin through there because the mesh isn't messing with channel lamination when you're trying to laminate the slick on. Just an easier lamination, not taking the mesh into the channels. So anyway, like I said, this is probably I have some pretty cool boards, but for me, having this given to me, I felt very lucky to be able to own a Rudder's board. I'm very stoked on this board. Like I said, it's probably my most prized board in my collection. And I got some cool old Morays and whatnot. There's something about this board just because of Luke being an influence to my shaping. I think that having one of his boards, and it's an Opalo, just for the reference, was pretty cool. I'm very lucky to get my hands on that board. I mean, I don't know how many boards he made, but not that many. So I'm pretty stoked to have one of his. You can see also my Delta bats back in here too. I rode the heck out of this board. It's a Delta quad. So yeah, like I said, I've ridden. This is number 24. I rode the heck out of this board. So. Just for reference, I mean, I was one of the first Delta bats. I kind of knocked down this because it's the normal bump back here is just an absolute ball crusher. So knocking this bump down center bump down kind of makes it a little more comfortable on the deck side. I love this board. This board's a fun ride. It's just a little loose in the tail because of the center bump. I just like if it was straight V through here and then back up, I think this tail would bite way better on the back. But having that center bump just makes it a little bit more loose through turns, which it can be fun, man. I can remember cranking this big turn with that wave, and it just like lip slid across the wave, and then I made it down. It was just an amazing turn. One of my most favorite turns I've probably ever even done was on that board. So, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that's a little bit of a rundown on some channel stuff, Fatima. I hope that kind of clarified some of the stuff. Like I said, there's so many channel systems out there. They're all just going to react a little bit different. But you got to put your time into riding a few different channel systems and tail systems, and kind of see what feels right to you. It's the only way, I could sit here and go, yeah, well, I mean, what would you recommend for people? What would you recommend for me? Well, I mean, it's hard for me to recommend something because I don't know what you like or what you want in a board. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I talked a little bit about the whole recommendations thing. And if you guys anybody missed that, you should go back and watch it. But it's just hard for me to do recommendations just because I need so much information from somebody to be able to truly recommend what would be good for that person. It's hard, I'm like, hey, you should probably just go look through some of the boards I've done for some ideas about, we could do that channels and maybe this tail. That sounds kind of cool to me. I think that's usually the direction I try to lead people, is that just go look at some of the things I've done and see what sparks a thing in your head going, oh, that looks cool. I'd love to ride something like that. Well, that's a base where we can start instead of me shooting in the dark about what you're going to like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to say it's a waste of my time, but I don't like doing recommendations. It's not so. I try to stray away from them. Like I said, I don't want the liability of recommending something to somebody and then be liable for that down the road. The last thing I want to do is build something for somebody and then they say, "Oh, I don't like this," and you recommended it to me. No, I don't want to get into that scenario. I want to work with you to figure out something that I think you're going to really like, and that's really my goal. Yeah, Fatima. I mean, flat bottom boards are make the world go around, just like the song goes. I think. Oh no, I think it's a little bit different than that. But yeah, flat bottoms are fast and loose. I think that's the only thing I can say about flat bottoms. They're fast and loose. But once you start riding a multi-channel, long channel board, most riders don't go back to riding standard channels. It's once you get comfortable with the feel of a long channel board, you're never going to want to ride a standard channel board. I mean, you will for nostalgic reasons or whatever, but when the waves get good and you want your board to perform good or better than what it could, you're going to be riding a quad or a 3-6 or whatever you want to ride, man. I mean, there's lots of options with channels out there, but yeah, the longer the channels and the more channels, for me, the better the waves gets. Just makes total sense. And then, there's a reason why people don't, there are all these crazy channels out there, is because they're time consuming to do. I've talked about that a little bit in some of the other things. I can shape standard channels in about 3 to 5 minutes. And, to do a full 3 to 6 or a full 6 channel bottom or something, that can take me, half an hour to do that. So when you're talking about, all of a sudden, that's one board. So now you multiply that times 100 boards, because we're going to build 100 of this model. Now, all of a sudden, all that time starts adding up really quickly. So for the manufacturer, that's how come you don't see a lot of tons of production boards with crazy channel bottoms, because they're so labor intensive to do. It just doesn't. It's not cost effective for the manufacturers to spend the time doing all those channels when they can just spend 3 to 5 minutes and put standard channels on the board, and people are going to buy it because that's what they know, and that's what a bodyboard should look like, and that's how it's always been. Instead of the things that I'm trying to do and trying to push the performance of a board, because you're adding all these crazy channels into it. Yeah, once you ride a multi-channel board, you're not going to really want to go back. It really is. It's a game changer. Yeah, hit me up if there's any questions, guys. Looks like we got 7 people in here, so fire away. We are getting close to that 7 o'clock hour. Like I said, I like doing these things from 6 to 7 on Friday nights until somebody else tells me otherwise. You know, I mean, that time seems to work pretty good for me, but it might not work great for, I know, like a lot of the guys in Hawaii. Sure say, oh man, you know, it's still, you know, 3 o'clock in Hawaii and I'm still at work on a Friday and I just can't make it and I'd love to be there. And, you know, some Europe guys in Europe have also mentioned, geez, I can't be there because it's so late. Yeah. So, I mean, but the thing is you can always go back to watch the replays of these things, you know, and watch them at your leisure and, you know, you can go back and listen to certain segments and things. That's another thing. I think I'll probably learn how to break up these videos a little bit. You know, I know there's ways to do that on YouTube. I'm going to probably dive into that over time and see if there's ways I can put little marks and stuff to kind of section out the video so you know when I'm talking about what, and makes the topics maybe a little bit easier to find within the hour for people. And maybe a little bit better descriptions in the videos too. There's a few things I'm going to do over time to kind of dial in this whole situation and stuff. So yeah, Fatima is asking about skin tech. So skin tech is, I mean, the best I can find is the description. I mean, it's, if you do some internet Google searches about what skin tech is, and there's only a few like under Google Images, some older production boards that were done out of the Brody factory, I believe. And what it is it's the true skin tech is it's a layer, at least the way I can tell from the pictures. And I've never really talked to Mez or anybody about that down there, but you know, I've just kind of done my best off the pictures I've seen. Now, if you've watched some of the videos before, we've talked a little bit about the EPP deck skin backing that I do on all my boards. And so what that is, you got your PE skin, but then you got a backing that goes on a skin. I'm going to grab something to show you this. Hold on a second. This picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. So, so this stuff right here, I get this in big rolls. It's expanded polypropylene. This side's a bare polypropylene, and then this side has a hot melted type adhesive on it. So this skin right here, it's about maybe 16th inch thick, a little bit, maybe just a hair thicker than that. This is the stuff. Okay, so now this is, like I said, this is polypropylene, but like your typical skins that you put on a board, all the skins are polyethylene. But then you got a core that's polypropylene. So you got to get all this stuff to stick together, right? You got ultimately what the goal is to get this to stick to the polypropylene core. But the problem is this is polyethylene. Polyethylene will not stick to polypropylene because they're different types of plastic. So you cannot stick them together just with heat. So what you need is some type of way to solve that dissimilar material situation. So over the years, you know, the guys overseas have developed this thing, this product with, like I said, it's expanded polypropylene. It's not beaded polypropylene. It's like expanded. So, you know, you don't see beads. It's just a really fine. But the thing is, it's nice and dense too. So what I do is I take this stuff and I pre-back it onto this stuff. So I'll pre-back my skins with this polyethylene skin, polypropylene backing. So, and then what you got, like I said, like this stuff has the hot melt adhesive right on one side. So when I put it on, it goes the adhesive side to the skin. So that makes, you know, because these are different types of foams. So this will stick together now because it has that adhesive in between it. So now what's happened is you have a polyethylene skin and you have a polypropylene backing. So what that'll do is now when you got a polypropylene core, it's polypropylene to polypropylene, it'll stick down to it. I'm getting to the skin tech. Now, sometimes people just call this stuff skin tech, but this is, from what I can tell from pictures I've seen, they'll pre-back skins like this, and then what they do is they'll put another layer of it across the core, and then there's a piece of mesh that goes in between that. So basically what in a skin tech, from what I can tell from the pictures, is that you get one layer of this stuff, a layer of mesh, another layer of this stuff, and then the deck skin. So you get this really beefed up sandwich of material that goes across the deck. Instead of it just, okay, so here's a piece of skin that already has the backing on it. So this is kind of what it'll look like with that. So ultimately what I'm talking about is now what you do is you'd have this that was already pre-coated, and then you're going to also sandwich all this stuff together to create even more of a complex deck side of the sandwich. So yeah, I've done a couple of them that have the double layer of this stuff with mesh in it, but like I said, it's just extra material, and what are you getting out of it? So I mean, there's definitely some things that are happening. You're getting a more dense backing on the backside of the foam in between the core, and you're getting the mesh layer in there. So it's definitely stiffening up the deck side of the board. So at least that's how I understand skin tech boards, is that it all happens on the top side of the board, and it's the sandwich of materials there. That's kind of how I understand deck or skin tech. So unless somebody can correct me, I'm always down, hey, if I'm wrong about anything that I say in these chats, hey, Phil, good to see you. If I'm wrong about anything in these chats and somebody wants to correct me, feel free to comment down below, or even if you're watching the replay of this and you see me say something and maybe you've heard a different story about this or that, hey, I'm always open to learning something. And if I'm wrong about something, well, I don't have a problem saying I'm wrong about something. I ultimately want to learn what's right. But I just try to share the knowledge that I have and things that all the research that I've done with all these different board constructions. And so, hey, if I'm wrong about something, I want to know how to do it right. But I give it my best shot. Like I said with the Opalo thing, the first one I didn't get quite right just because I was doing it off pictures. And as soon as I got the board, it was like, holy crap, I was doing this wrong. And now I can do it right. I can do it more accurately because I got the board in my hands. And I was the first one to tell the guy, hey, man, he's like, oh, man, these channels aren't quite right. And I'm like, well, it's kind of how I see him. And he's like, no, man, I'm going to send you this board. And like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, well, I did it wrong. No problem. I mean, I don't have a problem admitting I'm wrong, I just ultimately want to get better and learn more, So yeah, we're up to 10 people, which is cool. Hey, if anybody's got any questions, fire away in the feed. I know we're getting kind of close to the cutoff time, but if the chat feed's going and there's questions, I don't mind sticking around a little bit longer. So I'm glad there's some people that made it. It started a little slow today, and it looks like we're up to 10 people, which is cool. Yeah, I'm going to keep on doing these things. I really am enjoying them, and the more people we get here, and the more interactions we can get and questions, the better it's going to be for everybody, and the more knowledge we can spread around to everybody. So, talk to your friends about these things. I mean, I'm not big on pushing this and hey, subscribe, like all that. Nah, whatever. Do what you want to do, man. But hey, you can tell your friends, say, hey, I watch these little informational things that Ronan's doing, or Jason. My name's Jason. And I'm the only person at Ronin. I'm, like I said, I'm a one-man show and doing what I do. So, I just want to make cool content and try to get knowledge out there. Yep. Yeah, for life, dude. Definitely. I'm going to keep on doing these for a while. As long as I can keep on every week, I'm like, I got to get some topics together that I can talk about. And I usually like to come in with like at least three things, kind of little topics I want to talk about. But then I really enjoy the questions and feedback from people. It really helps these things go a little bit more than me just sitting here rambling about the three topics I have. I really want to answer people's questions as best I can. Even if I have to answer it the same question as last week or 2 weeks ago, I'm still willing to do it. Florida, huh? Hey, man, I know you guys just got pounded down there. So best wishes to anybody down in Florida right now. I know it's kind of a grim situation down there. Hopefully you and your family and your friends weren't too impacted by any of that stuff. But I don't think there's anybody down there weren't affected on some level. It looked pretty nasty. So yeah, best wishes, and hopefully you guys are recovering from all that madness. Yeah, it's tough to see things like that happen, but it's the nature of life in the world, unfortunately, is that stuff gets sideways sometimes. It's just the reality of life. And the places we choose to live, I'm pretty lucky where I live. It's that we hardly ever get rain, let alone a hurricane. It's pretty wild how dry it is here, especially these days. Yeah, Nathaniel, just get the word out. People want to, the replays are out there too. You can, so go back and get them to, I watch the view counts on these things go up every single week, which is really cool. And that's, watching people still discovering these things and diving into them. That's kind of what motivates me to keep doing them too. The more I see the view counts go up, I'm like, oh, okay, people are digging this. People are watching it and enjoying it and learning stuff. So that's kind of why I want to do these things. It's fun for me to give back and be available to my customers. Because like I said, you can't find too many shapers that are going to sit around for an hour their Friday night and do this and put in the extra time. For me, it's just another day. I don't live on a Monday to Friday kind of life like most people do. I work every day and I play every day. So that's kind of been my life for quite a few years now, is that I don't have a Monday. I don't have a Friday. There's no Saturday. There's no Wednesday. It's just every day is the same for me. I work every day and I play every day. So I like to, if the waves are good, I'm in the waves, but I'm always working every single day. I mean, I wake up every morning and get into messages with people and reply to people. It's just part of the business, is that I got to dive in every single morning and respond to emails and messages and have some social media content and do some things every single day just to keep the wheels on the bus, man. It's just the only way it's going to do it is to put energy into it every single day, even a little bit. So, some days I work my ass off for 10 hours a day and I don't really get to surf that much. But then if the waves are good, I'll go out and surf twice in a day and only work a couple hours. But that's the freedom I have. But I don't get days off, unless I leave and go out of town. That's the only time I get days off, is when I leave. So I live a very blessed life. I'm not complaining one bit. So I'm very lucky to be in the position I am. But I have to work very hard to keep all, like I said, it's constant work. I got to keep the wheels turning on this whole machine. I don't think people realize how much money I dump back into this business just to keep it going, because the materials are not cheap, and you have to buy them in bulk. You can't go out and buy one piece of skin or one piece of sirloin, or a one piece of core. It doesn't work that way. You have to buy things in bulk, and And another thing about it is the more you buy, the cheaper things get. So you always want to buy as much as you can when it comes to materials, because it cuts the cost down. Well, if it's just the shipping, it's just, it costs more to ship, one thing this month and one thing next month. But if you order them together in 1 month, and all of a sudden you get savings because you ordered them together. So that's a huge part of the business, is I'm just constantly reinvesting money back into the materials to keep everything going. But I love it. I'm not going to stop anytime. I mean, I'm going to keep grinding every single day because I love this. I really do. It's so much fun. I've had my own architecture business for years and woodworking business for years, and I'm hardly doing any of that stuff anymore, just because I'm enjoying this bodyboard thing so much, and it's getting me by in life. That's ultimately all anybody's trying to do, is just get by in life and pay the bills, and keep the roof over your head and maintain your life. Maybe save a little bit, but for me, I don't even really save that much anymore these days, because any extra money, I'm always reinvesting it back into materials. It's one of the things I heard about Tom Moray. If you listen to any Tom Moray videos from him back in the day, or he used to always just be like, the business isn't that rich, just because we're constantly putting money back into the business, and there's not a lot of profit in it, because every bit of profit you just put right back into materials to keep the wheels turning on everything. And I realize I'm just a one-man show, and it's a little bit easier. I don't have all the overhead of the big boys that have factories and employees and all that stuff. So I'm very blessed that I can be able to do it on such a small level. Yeah, Phil, I'm constantly doing woodworking stuff. I had somebody just drop off chairs that need repaired today. I got like 3 chairs that are just sitting right here out of frame that I got to work on a little bit over the weekend. They're all kind of busted up, and glue joints are all loose and stuff, just for a friend. So he's like, "Hey, can you fix these things?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, bring them over." And I got another little, maybe I'll bust this out. I got a little box I'm working on for a friend. It's only about halfway done. It's got just barely did some glue ups on it, but it's something called a bandsaw box. I don't know if anybody's ever, played around with a bandsaw or whatever, but there's ways to build cool little boxes on a bandsaw, and basically it's like you cut it up into you glue up a block, and then you start cutting it apart with the bandsaw. And you can create cool little patterns and stuff with the bandsaw box. But it's a series of cuts on the bandsaw. You start with this big block of wood, and you just start cutting up that block into shapes, and then cutting pieces out of it to create little pockets and drawers and stuff. And I've done a few of these, but this is the one I'm currently working on. It's like in a wave shape, right? So this was a big block. You see, I just barely did the back on it last night. So it's a sandwich of 3 woods, and it's just then like I said, I cut the outside shape out, and then what you do is you cut into it, and then you cut out that, and you run the saw through here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's little cut lines through here that then you glue it back together after you get all the other pieces cut out. So these pockets will end up being they're little pull out drawers. So those pieces are all over on the other side over there. I still got some sanding to do and stuff on that. Hey, Sterling. Good to see you. So yeah, this is one of the little woodworking projects I got going on right now for a friend. I got to get it done like the next month. It's like a birthday present for one of my friends. So these be like 3 little individual drawers you can pull out of here. So it's a little wave shape, and yeah, artsy fartsy stuff, but I love it. What I do. I occasionally will build I like building cutting boards and stuff too. I've built cutting boards for damn near all my friends. I like doing end grain style stuff. Like if you know what a butcher block, I know we're getting off topic. I know we're talking about wood stuff instead of boogie board stuff, but just a little bit of my background. Like this is an end grain cutting board that I have right now. It's about 2.5 inch thick, and it's all maple, walnut, cherry, and oak. I think is all in this one, and it's kind of all like a book matched glue ups and stuff too, so I kind of get this repeating cool patterns kind of stuff. So yeah, I build a few of these a year for my friends and stuff, and just usually give them away or whatever. So my whole shop was a woodworking shop for years, and that's all I did. I did architecture and woodworking for years, and my wood shop is now a bodyboard shop. I still do some wood stuff, but it was started off as a wood shop, but it's a bodyboard shop now. But I'm still able to do just about. I can do anything with wood, pretty much. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty accomplished woodworker. I can do down there just about anything from frame a house to build the cabinets and all the stair work, whatever you want inside of it. I've done all kinds of stuff inside the house that I've designed. So I've done some pretty fun, crazy stuff. I like the more complex and detailed it is, kind of like with boards. It's the same thing. It's people think building a bodyboard's complicated, but try to figure out how to build a whole house. There's a lot of bits and pieces and parts and things that go into just making that house. To me, a bodyboard's simple compared to what goes into a house. So, yeah. Well, shoot. Don't be sorry, Phil. I'm happy to share some of my other skills, and hopefully that people get curious about what my background is, and how did I get to the point of having being able to build a boogie board. But it's crazy how much my woodworking skills and all the tools that I had for all that were all that foundation and years of using all those tools were so helpful when it came to start building bodyboard. It's like I already knew how to use a router and a table saw and a bandsaw and all these things. I'd done some heat gun work and stuff even before I built a bodyboard, doing like some edge laminating stuff. Sometimes you have to use a heat gun kind of stuff for some laminating kind of work, where you use plastic laminates or wood laminates on stuff. You have to heat stuff up to stick it on, hot melt adhesives on the back, some of that stuff. So I've done a little bit of heat gun work and stuff in the past, but the sanding and the routing and the planing, hand planes and all the chisels and routers and all. I just had all that years and years of experience of doing all that stuff, and it was super critical, and it makes me that much. It gives me my eye. Ultimately, it's my eye, because I have such a detailed eye for dimensions and shape and balance and stuff because of my background in woodworking and architecture, that my eyes just pick up on little things on a board that I think most people look right past because they just don't have the eye for it. But yeah, putting all those years into woodworking and architecture, it makes me that much better of a shaper. I truly believe. And then running my own architecture business, I don't think I'd been able to do what I'm doing with Ronan if I didn't have the experience of running my own architecture and woodworking business for over 12 years or 13 years now. I think I've had my own business on that side of stuff. But I think all that experience really helped me on the business side of doing Ronan. It really did help. Just understanding that, managing all the accounts, the payables and the receivables, all the accounting side of the stuff that you have to do. I had to do all that with my architecture business, but it wasn't quite as complicated as I think Ronan's even more complicated because of all the extra materials and stuff I have to do. There's way more expenses with doing this business because I'm constantly reinvesting and spending money on stuff, where my architecture business, all I had to really buy was ink and paper and a computer. I have a big plotter and everything upstairs, so I can do all my own full size blueprints and all that stuff and do all the printing for that. But the expenses are it's a totally different game. But all that knowledge just helped me with this business. I think if you're just trying to dive into it and then it's the only thing you're going to do, it would be pretty overwhelming for most people that had just a 9-to-5 job. And then it's the uncertainty of the unknown too, is that, how many boards am I going to get on order this month? Am I going to get enough to pay my bills? And most people don't like that insecurity of not knowing I'm getting my paycheck in 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks I get this amount and I set my budget off of that. And I mean, most people live that way, but I haven't lived that way in years. It's just, I live month to month, and some months are good and some months are not so good. But it's just the reality of being self-employed over all the years. And it really gives you a sense of freedom and confidence, because you don't know what coming next month, but you just have to have faith that something is going to come, and somehow it always does. It blows my mind that every month that somehow the board orders keep coming, or the wood projects or the architecture stuff just lands in my lap, and I survive somehow. And I'm so grateful that now I don't have to do much of that other stuff, and I can just focus on building boards, because like I said, I've done all that other stuff for so many years that doing this to me is so much. It's like a turning of the page, and I get to express all my skills and knowledge and stuff in a different way. And it's a fresh start for me in a lot of ways. And I'm just really, really enjoying where I'm at right now. So I really do appreciate all the people showing up and stuff. It's pretty cool. Said I'm an hour and 20 minutes into it. I think it's the longest one I've done. So instead of me rambling on about me and my background and stuff, and unless there's any more questions, I might kind of start to wrap this thing up. Anybody's got any questions, fire away. Getting into the countdown. Yep, I got a bunch of boards on order. So like I said, if you guys follow on the Instagram, I post a lot of stuff in the story about the builds and stuff. So it's really fun to watch. As far as the main posts in Instagram and Facebook, I keep them pretty much board related. Yeah, Sterling, yours is like not the next one, but it's the next one. So I mean, you're in the batch, but as far as numbers go, you're right up there, you and Nick. So you guys I appreciate the support, dude. You guys and all the content you guys generate. It's really cool to see the stuff damn near every single day. Yeah, it's really cool what you guys are doing. I really appreciate all your guys' work and your dedication to showing up at the beach every day and just going for it. It's really cool. I enjoy watching all the pictures you guys and all the content you generate. I really do appreciate the tags and all the posts and stuff. Thank you. It really means a lot. Okay. Nick's asking about all the arrows and stuff. I get that question every once in a while. So actually, I think I have one right back here. Why did I have a feel? I think I almost had a feeling that was going to come up today. Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the Instagram post I did today and all the pictures of the edges of the board. I usually like to try to do that when I start on a board, so that way people know I'm starting on their board, because sometimes, they'll order a board and it's been a week or something before I've started on it. So it's just my way of saying, hey man, I started on your board. Check it out. It's being worked on. So the first post that I usually do, it's just a piece of the blank core like this. And it's usually, I always start off by, I always look at the blank piece of core. So, and I do what you call crowning. Okay. So, and this is a woodworking term where you sight down the edge of a board and you look for any kind of bows or twists in the board. So same thing I do with every piece of core is that I look down the piece of core and I look, because all core has a little bit of rocker in one way or the other, just a little bit. So what I like to do is I like to crown it up like you would a board sometimes in certain situations, but I always crown up on my core pieces. And I always pick a point that's the nose and the crown up. So as far as the numbers on here go, the first little number you see here, sometimes this number varies, and that's how thick I'm going to sand the core to, depending on how thick the board's going to be in the end, because you got to stack all the other stuff on top of it. So you got to sand the core to the thickness you want, so it finishes out at the target number. But obviously the core isn't as thick as the whole board, because you got to sandwich all the other stuff on it. So this is the number that I sand the core to. These two arrows, that's the nose, and then that's the crown up. And then I put the board number and then the person I'm building it for. It's all in the rail of the board. So that way it helps me keep track of what's going on with the board. And then what these arrows do is it tells me how I'm going to feed it through the sander. I always like to push the nose into the sander and then the crown up. I got to sand the top and the bottom of these cores so it gets flipped over both ways. Both sides get sanded, so that way it's nice and parallel and flat all the way through both sides of the board. There's a big wide belt sander here that does that. It's probably the biggest tool in my garage. So it's just to sand the cores to thickness. So that's kind of what the numbers that you see are on here. So yeah, and what's cool too is that this labels the piece of core, and then I'll do the layout work across all the points on the top of here and the center line. I always starts at the center line, and then all the points of the layout points. And then what I'll do is I'll take and cut the rail edge off, right? Each rail edge gets cut off. But then that cutoff piece, what I like to do is I like to save that, right? And what happens is that those little pieces I save to put inside the shipping box because it fits the side of the rail of the board perfectly, and it protects the board in the box when you're shipping it. So I think it's a pretty cool way to use the cutoff pieces, that you're not just taking those pieces and throw them in the recycle bin. I'm actually using them to help ship some of the shipping stuff in the board. So, and then I always try to leave this part of the core so you can see your name. If you ever open up your box when you get your board, when it's shipped to you, you'll almost always see this on the edge of the board. And what you'll also can do is to pull this out and know that this is the core. The edges of the piece of the box that come inside the box, the edges of the core pieces are actually what the core is inside the board. If you ever want to know what's my core look like on the inside of my board, just look at those pieces that come off the edge of the board, and that's exactly what the core is inside your board. So yeah, it's pretty wild that a lot of times this beaded polypropylene is used for packing material. It just happens to be a great core for bodyboarding. So to use it for using it for the cutoff for shipping is just one little thing that I've found that works pretty well for me. And I'm kind of using some scrap to help ship, and it also shows the customer what the piece of core looks like inside their board. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown on some of those numbers and how some of the cutoffs are used. I know some people will pull their board out of the box and take a picture of their board when they get it with that rail piece. A couple people have sent me that. I'm like, yeah, cool, that's rad. It's pretty cool that they're pulling that out. I know a couple of guys actually even just save those pieces. They get all nostalgic about it, So I think that's pretty cool too. Like, people want to put that and hang it on their wall in their garage or something, just having it. It says, hey, that's the cut off from the core of my board. It's pretty cool. Yeah, Nick, like I said, yeah, see, there's a couple of people that are doing it right now. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like to hear that, guys. Thanks. Well, shoot, I guess if nobody's got any more questions, maybe I'll start to sign off. Like I said, almost got an hour and a half on this. This is by far the longest one I've done. So appreciate all the questions and everybody showing up. It's been fun, and said I'm not going to stop doing these things. So maybe I'll start to sign off and say thanks for coming out, and I think it's about dinner time for me. So appreciate everybody coming for coming out and all the support and the questions, and guys, I really do appreciate it. Guess I'll see you on the Instagram or here next week. I appreciate all the support. So I think I'm going to sign off and call it a day. Anyhow, thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you next week. Appreciate it. Ciao for now.